Hey, Lexi.
Hey,
Morning. Oh. You want Claude to show his video or?
we are,
Hey, Lexi. Morning.
we, hold on.
You want Claude to show his video or?
No, you don't have to.
Okay.
There's echo. Hey, there's an echo. You have a couple of devices on. There's echo. Do you have a couple of devices on? Hey, there's an echo. You have a couple of devices on. Do you have a couple of devices on? Hey, there's an echo. You have a couple of devices on. You have a couple of Robin, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, somebody had a Claude's on. Robin, can you hear me?
Yes. It sounds a little different though. Yes, I can.
Okay, somebody had a Claude's on. Robin, can you hear me?
Yes. It sounds a little different though. Yes, I can.
Yeah, I've been muted. That's a weird echo now.
Got a few more minutes. Good morning, Chad.
Hey, good morning, Phil.
Do you hear an echo?
No, sounds good.
Okay. We have somebody on the council.
Great.
You might be going live all over the place. I'll also have it on YouTube. So we'll get to people as they get here.
That thing?
Say again. So we'll go with whoever's here. Victor's not logged on yet. James is traveling.
But the really important people are on.
Yeah, they've logged. Should we go ahead and get started?
I think we're ready. We were assuming you
I
were
don't
gonna
want them to
introduce
give me a
him.
big.
We'll go ahead and get started. We're on YouTube and possibly with the Tribe Rebel channel. I want to welcome everybody to our presentation here. This is on the Sicangu's climate adaptation plan that we helped develop over the ending completed on May of 2022. And we've been wanting to present this to the Oyate, to our relatives here at Sicangu Makoche. We have different people that I invited to sit in on the presentation. Later on, you could have questions and a Q&A at the end of the presentation, or it depends on how we look with time. I have scheduled this for 10 a.m. to 12:30. So, but if you need more time, Chad, Laura will play it by ear today. I know Robin is pretty windy. He's very gifted that way. But I wanted, and also have Dr. Robertson here. He is on the Data Sovereignty Initiative team also, and you want to welcome everybody. Mitake Piyuha Chante Washa Napeo Choose Bob. I'm gonna go ahead and work. Mitake Piyuha Chante Washa Napeo Choose Bob na Dr. Wan Beto ki e wongla ka te ki le Dr. Makasi Tomonia Uchimakha Tanta Dr. Climate change after I wongla ka pikitelo cha. Hello gana the wapi wawashi unkagapi cha lene cha unkogalaka unchipi cha. Once again, I want to welcome everybody. I shake your hand with a good heart. We wanted to present this report to the Oyate, to the Sicangu people. I've also invited some of our Ocheti Sakoni relatives. They're very curious how we are doing things over here on Sicangu Makoche.
Your telecom sweeps. Makes noise. A lot better.
If you could put your microphone on mute until you're ready to talk, we appreciate it. Later on, we'll have some Q&A. So I'm going to invite Robin to jump on here and sort of give us an overview of the Sicangu Climate Adaptation Plan. And towards the end, I hope Laura, you can hang around. We will have Laura give a presentation on the climate, weather here on the Sicangu, Makoche, and across South Dakota and the Great Plains. Over 2 weeks ago, we had 2 storms. And what's interesting is that the snow is still hanging around. It didn't melt. And then there's another storm tonight. We've given several presentations, and during those times, we mentioned that we could possibly face extreme weathers in our reports. So, but this is another opportunity for the Sicangu Tribal Council leader, the Sicangu IRA leadership to get a report from us. I am recording this, so those that have missed it will be able to view it again at another time. We'll send it around again. So whenever Victor comes online, we'll see when he can do his part. Victor DeVille of Santiago State University, Professor Emeritus, he works with us on the climate work. He helps us, and we work with our elders on make sure we include the traditional knowledge, they call it indigenous knowledge. So, Robin, did you want to take it from here? And you're on mute, Robin.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I'll just say a few words and then turn it over to my colleague, Chad McNutt. I'll just introduce the team of people that worked with you on this plan. Chad and I did a lot of the work. Chad's wife and a partner of hers have a firm that was also joined, that's Lark Environmental. And we had people like James Rattlingleaf advising us, and expertise such as Laura Edwards, who's the South Dakota State climatologist, and Imtiaz Rangwala, and both Laura and Imtiaz are with the Climate Adaptation Science Center at UC Boulder. So we had a team of folks that brought a lot of the scientific perspectives, but it was the work with you and Claude and Victor that really brought a lot of the heart to this plan. So I'll stop there and let Chad go through the early part of this, and then we'll flip back and I'll take the later part of the recommendations. So Chad, do you want to take it away?
Yep, that sounds good. Phil, hopefully I can share my screen here. Yep, looks like I can. Okay.
We had to take his picture off the posters. We had to get him security. Oh yeah,
Does everybody see my screen?
You're Tampa Lays.
Yeah.
He's from the northern
So
part of India.
I'm just on a Zoom right now. I do work with my tribe.
Oh, wonderful, brother.
Hey, if somebody could mute your phone, if everybody could mute your phones. Yeah, thank you. All right. So thanks, Robin, for the introduction. Phil, thanks for putting this together. And we really, as Robin said, we really benefited from Phil and Paula's guidance in particular, and the Sicangu Climate Crisis Working Group. So there's some cultural things in here that we put in here, but of course these aren't things that we came up with. These are things that we received from guidance through Phil and Paula, and also from some of the elders that are on this call, including Victor DeVille, who I guess will be here later. So this is a cover of the report. Hopefully most of you have seen the actual printed version, but we also have links to that. I think it's on the Facebook page, Phil, and maybe on the website, on the tribe's website, but I'm not sure about that. Okay. One of the first things that's in the report is a vision statement. This is just a shortened version of that. It's both in Lakota and in English. And this has kind of helped guide us as we thought about creating this report and the information that went into it, and the context in which it came into, and that hopefully it could be used by the tribe. So I'm just going to flash that up there. Some statistics about the plan. There's a lot of, as Robin mentioned, there's a lot of things that went into this. So it was finished, kind of in the late May, early June timeframe. I've got June up here, but that's it. It hasn't been that long ago. It was led by the Sicangu Climate Crisis Working Group, co-chaired by Phil and Paula. We had 11 community meetings. We conducted 18 tribal and federal government interviews as part of this process. We conducted a community survey and received 271 individual responses. We conducted several elder interviews. And as Robin mentioned, we had an amazing amount of academic and federal scientists that participated in producing this report, much more than you would probably normally get in a report like this. And then finally, the last thing, this is more recent. The report has resulted in about $1.6 million coming into the tribe to implement parts of it. So we'll mention that later on in this presentation. So the agenda, we're just going to talk about this plan, the input that went into it, and then some of the recommendations. And then Laura is going to follow us with some climate and weather trends. Okay, so in the report we kind of conducted 4 different activities to get input. So these are community meetings, community surveys, interviews with tribal and federal program managers, and we also conducted elder interviews, as I've already said. So in terms of the community meetings, we held 9 virtual meetings. So this was in the time of COVID, so we couldn't actually conduct in-person meetings, but we held 9 virtual meetings. And those were mostly with the community presidents, but other members of the communities also attended. We also held 2 reservation-wide meetings that also were soliciting input from the community. We weren't getting a lot of participation in the individual community meetings, so we opened it up to the entire reservation. And so we actually conducted 11 total virtual meetings for the community. I'm just moving you guys over here. Okay. And so during the meeting, the purpose was to talk about the plan, to describe the plan, and then ways for the community to engage with the plan. So we talked about what's the latest in terms of the climate science, and then presented a lot of the climate data and a lot of the history in South Dakota, and specifically for the reservation. And we talked about the mechanisms on why climate change is occurring and what is potentially projected, if through some of the models that are out there. At the very end of the meeting, we always concluded with an opportunity for the attendees to provide questions and or input on the changes they might have noticed on climate and weather, how those changes might be affecting them, and what information they would find helpful about climate change and the science around it. And if they are worried about things like natural disasters or extreme weather, like what is occurring right now. And so these are some of the things that came out of that people were concerned about: hotter and more humid summers, more snowfall with higher moisture content, which again, we've seen more recently, damaging summer storms, to consider, taking care of land and Mother Earth, reducing trash and litter. The tribe should look at more sources for alternative energy, and to consider disasters like floods and fires in particular. There was also concern that traditional knowledge is being lost, that the tribe should plant more trees, and that the community still lacks a lot of information about climate change. And so more outreach needs to be done to give more information to the community on ways that climate change may affect them. All right. Sorry, I'm having trouble. Okay. So the next piece of input was a community survey, and this is just a map of the communities, and you can see kind of where most of the responses came from. We did receive a response from all 20 of the communities, but you can see kind of where most of the input came from. But I do think getting over 270 responses is good. And so I think a lot of this had to do with the interaction that we had with the climate change working group, and using the mechanisms on the reservation to get the word out to the community. So we announced and advertised it via the Facebook page, through the Sicangu Climate Crisis Working Group Facebook page. We also did this through the Rosebud Sioux Tribe Channel 93, through the radio station KOYA. We posted flyers around the reservation. at the grocery stores, community centers, et cetera. We put an ad in the local newspaper, the Todd County Tribune. We also put it on the tribe's website. And then the email went out from the president to all tribal employees mandating the completion of the survey. And that there was an announcement posted several times at the university as well. And so we really owe a lot to the working group for getting the news out about taking the survey. And these are some of the results. This is not all of them, but in the longer report, we have an appendix that summarizes the specific input that we received. I'm just going to go over kind of four things here, kind of the four main things that people were concerned about. First of all, that 87% of those that took the survey were enrolled members. So that's good. That's kind of what we expected. In terms of concerns about the changing climate, drought was the overwhelming concern that people had, followed by extreme heat. In terms of preparing for the effects of climate change on our people and culture, people were concerned about identifying highly valued plants, animals, and places, and how climate change may be affecting them. Also, the second thing was upgrading the community infrastructure. And in terms of focus for climate change planning, people really were concerned about water quality and availability, and followed by the health of the people there on the reservation. The last thing was when we asked how to improve infrastructure to withstand climate-driven weather extremes, there were kind of two things. One was investing in energy efficient systems and buildings, and two, ensure all homes have reliable sources of heat. Those were the two main things. And again, if you want to see more information on what the survey results found, please take a look at the longer version of the report. The next source of information we did these program manager interviews. So you can see the list of folks that we spoke to there for the Rosebud Tribe. But we also spoke to folks on the council, and then of course we spoke to some BIA folks as well. And so those 13 interviews with the actual program directors and members of the council, we did them over the phone and Zoom again because of COVID. They were usually about 1 hour. And so the scope of the calls we're trying for us to understand the objectives of their programs, how weather and climate currently affects them, and then potential future impacts they fear or foresee, and then information or data that would be of use in understanding or addressing climate impacts. And so some of the themes that were mentioned in the course of this, again, were some of the themes that the community has mentioned: weather and climate extremes, increased rainfall and flooding, droughts and extreme heat events. They're concerned about harming tribal members, and especially those that are poor in remote locations. There was also discussion about that Rosebud is relatively well prepared, in terms of drinking water, but that overall drought planning still needs to be implemented. So there's a good drought plan on the books, but it needs to be implemented. The next thing was that living relatives in important locations are still at risk. So that came through loud and clear. And then lastly, changes in rainfall, drought, temperature, and other factors will place at-risk tribal activities related to forestry, ranching, and agriculture in peril. And so those are kind of the four themes that we heard. And then you'll hear some of the recommendations later from Robin. And then the last, but certainly not least, input that we received were from elders, and you can see the 4 elders that we interviewed here. So these occurred in late February of last year, and this was coordinated through Phil and the Climate Crisis Working Group. And then all the interviews were prompted with a general request to talk about climate change and about what actions the elders feel like the Oyate should take, and for the tribal council to take. And so these are some of the quotes. Again, if you look at the report, you can see a longer appendix that has the input from the elders, but you can see some of the quotes here. And these are without attribution. The easy life is running the heck out of us. We need to pick up the trash, start somewhere. There's no respect for life. We need to help each other. Young people step up and say what they want to be done. We're walking toward the sunset. The tribe should assess what it has and what it needs to do. Reduce trash. Policy should be enacted to reduce unneeded water use. There are old leaking storage tanks and nitrates from farm operations that damage water supplies. And then a strong spiritual grounding is needed for the Oyate to thrive. And then finally, when we were producing the plan, we had a lot of discussions with the working group that we should consider adding to the plan things that could be implemented if additional money came in. One of those was creating a geodatabase. So a geodatabase in this case is all data that are related to the tribe. It could be demographic data, it could be climate data, it could be boundary data, ownership data, anything that was available, we included in this large geodatabase. And the point of doing that was to have this start as a foundation for the Sicangu Climate Center. And that's the 1.6 million that came in this year to implement. And so we have at least a starting point of that certainly needs to be added to. And then the other thing that we did, and this was particularly in coordination with the land department and Paula, was to create 20 profiles for the community or profiles for the 20 communities there. And so each profile describes infrastructure and demographics, the natural features, wildfire hazard, and climate change planning and management issues for each community. So we have each one of those that are in the larger plan. So again, I encourage you to take a look at that. And so that's pretty much my section. I think I'm going to turn it over to Robin now. And Robin, I can drive the slides if you want as you go through the recommendations from the plan. And I think you're on mute.
Yeah, I'll take over from here and drive from here if that's all right.
Yep. Okay.
All right. So you all can see my recommendation slide, correct?
We're seeing your email.
Oh, then I picked the wrong, all right. Let me try this again. Sorry, folks. Why can't I get this?
Robin, looks like you have an email from me you didn't open yet.
Yeah. I'm trying to get my Zoom back into all right, I can't make my Zoom work now. Here, let me try this.
While you're doing, I wanted to let the folks know that our emissary is online, James Radlingly.
All right, now we are
Hang on,
on
still.
Oh,
recommendation.
Unbelievable.
Okay, can you see the recommendation slides now?
Yes.
Yes, okay, sorry about that. So Chad has kind of laid out what we did, and we did a lot of listening. And it was a difficult period because we were always on the phone and never in the same room with people, and that loses a lot. But the recommendations fell into three broad areas, and you started to see some of them coming out of the conversations and the various consultations we had. But it was pretty clear that climate change is going to hurt people. Life and property is at risk. And I can't say how shocked I was or how amazed I was that this winter actually turned into one of the stories that folks like Sam Highcrane and Claude Tuelk told us about hard times in the past when people were trapped by the snow. And it happened again this year. So taking care of the people is the first chore that comes out of this because there's great risk. Chad mentioned protecting and using water. Rosebud's in a great situation legally and geographically and all that, but there's risks, and that water is the basis of everything, and so it deserves a good amount of attention. And climate change will very much change the face of the landscape, and it will change who lives there and how critters can live there. And so we rely on them for lots of things, ranching and farming, et cetera, all the way down to the really important small creatures. So these were the three bins that we put things into. And you've kind of heard this coming. We had 4 recommendations that we think are of the highest priority for the tribe. And I say we, it's the team of the folks that you're hearing on this call and the Climate Crisis Working Group. So 4 really, really important recommendations. One is, I mentioned, address human needs in weather emergencies. Taking care of the people is job 1. Implementing the Rosebud Drought Adaptation and Mitigation Plan. The Water Department, Syed Huck at Rosebud have done a great job of building the background for how much water we might be able to expect, when it might go badly, and what can be done in order to respond to those things. Full implementation of that plan is crucial. And there are some recent developments, legal developments, that may give the tribe greater authority over, well, non-Indian users in particular, but greater legal authority over its water. And that would be a major step forward and would enable the adaptation and mitigation plan for drought to be implemented fully. The last 2 are longer term and envision the length and breadth of this challenge. Climate change is going to be with us for all of the lives of everybody on this call and all of the lives of everybody on this call's kids and grandkids. And it needs a focused attention. This is going to be around for a while. It's going to require a lot of different ways of doing business. If the landscape changes, if the need for housing quality changes, all of those things need some focus and attention. And it can't be left scattered about in various departments and hoping it'll all come together. So we believe a tribal office, and we have used the term itachan, which I probably am mispronouncing, but to think about the historic roles and responsibilities that the tribe divided among its people. So putting the focus of someone and some office and some effort to make sure we keep our eye on the climate ball. And the last, which again has been awarded a $1.6 million BIA award to implement, is a vision of Phil and some others of a data center that has the information that Rosebud needs to maintain and manage its resources. A sovereign nation needs to be able to control its resources and manage them effectively. And information is absolutely crucial to the ability to manage and understand those resources. And there's going to be enormous stress on them coming in the future. So the notion is to build a capacity to own the information. So it's not over there in BIA or over in the Forest Service or in the state office someplace. It's owned by the tribe and managed by the tribe to do its business. Some more details on the individual groupings of recommendations, and you'll see reflected here some of the things that Chad mentioned from the community meetings. Weather emergencies, emergency roads, the ability to get through to people. I've seen the Facebook posts of people, not being able to get their propane this last few weeks. A local warning system. Phil mentioned that the snow is hanging around. Well, that snow is going to melt at some point, and if it melts all of a sudden, you're going to have floods. That's the kind of thing that warning systems can give people a little bit more time. Reliable heating and cooling. So some of these are short-term things you can do pretty quickly. Get a warning system or what have you. Some of the things are longer term. Considering rooftop solar as a component of any new housing development on the reservation takes a lot of time and effort. So building codes that will ensure that houses will withstand both the heat and the cold that we're likely to face. Protecting and wisely using the water. Again, I have to give great credit to the Rosebud Water Department. They've laid the basis for this. We actually didn't have a lot to do in the water area because they had really laid the groundwork. Tribal water code is in place, but until recently was not able to be implemented because of a legal decision by the Interior Department. Secretary Holland has reversed that decision, so it's my expectation that at some point Rosebud will gain the authority over its water that a sovereign nation should have. We mentioned the drought adaptation and mitigation plan. That really gives a roadmap for how to respond when things get tight, and they will get tight. And there's got to be a way of fairly allocating that, protecting the most vulnerable people, et cetera. And the last is, again, a longer term perspective, but you all have great access to Missouri River water. There's water under Rosebud that's very useful, but we don't know a heck of a lot about it, or there's a lot we don't know about it. Figuring out where it is, where it flows. You heard mention of both of nitrates and wells in Rosebud territory. Some of them are contamination sources, and we need to understand where that water is going to end up. If we need to access it during a drought or what have you. So there's more science and more monitoring that needs to be done to make sure you all know exactly what water is available, which of it is contaminated by who knows, any number of things. So there's a good plan for using this for protecting the water, and our strongest message is to listen to the water department and move ahead with their plans, because they're very, very well developed plans. Finally, protecting the land and living relatives. One side of this isn't all that readable, but clean up the reservation. The notion of local food sovereignty. I have mentioned on several occasions to Phil that Rosebud is at the end of very long supply chains. And as you all saw in the last couple of years, supply chains can break. And the more locally sufficient you are, the less that's going to come into play. Things like a game and meat processing facility locally, that can make things go from really tight to much more locally sustainable. Habitat conservation, reducing overgrazing, understanding what's going to happen to the forests and grasslands at Rosebud. I work with some people in Minnesota who are seeing all of the trees on their territory. It's a state park, but their trees are all dying because it's gotten significantly wetter. Well, Rosebud's getting wetter too, and we think there may be a whole lot more shrub growth and that sort of thing happening. And how that's going to affect how Rosebud folks use the land is really important. More trees, forage production for both beef cattle and buffalo. Changes in rainfall mean changes in forage, changes in types of grass are likely to be coming. Understanding what's coming is really necessary to being able to prepare for it. So, and then preserve the sacred plants, at-risk species, and think about that when development occurs and where activities can happen. So those really are the main recommendations. Take care of the people, take care of the water, take care of the land, and then plan for the long term. Have someone who's responsible for this, a point of responsibility and accountability to the leadership and the people, and understand and have the information that you need to make decisions and have them be legally sufficient. So I'll stop there, and I think we're going to let Laura Edwards talk a little bit more about what actually is coming and how we see how the science community sees the world in the future. So I'll turn it over to Laura.
I can certainly go, but Phil, if you want to handle question and answers on that first part, I'm happy to wait for a little while. That was kind of
Okay.
a lot of information that they just shared, so.
We'll open up for any questions out there. Some of the things that we didn't cover here today is that the emphasis to plan and prepare for the next storm. So it's really important, and something that's going on, that has been going on for thousands of years, is the buffalo. The increasing the bison herds for our tribe will help us in the climate battle. They are made for this land, and also the wildlife. There's efforts to keep wild areas wild. So I know there might be some cattle ranchers out there, but the buffalo is more suited for our environment, you know. And maybe I want to reassure you that the land office is involved in this. They're very concerned about the land. So Paula, if you want to jump in here.
Sure. Thanks, Phil. I just wanted to say that with the reintroduction and increasing the buffalo herd, and increasing the forage and feeding lots for other wildlife, really impacts the land all over the place. Like for instance, in the Yellowstone, they reintroduced wolves in that area, and it ended up changing and improving the river. So it really, when we have the natural habitats of the area, if we help them in their dwelling, it just changes the whole overall environment. And plus, the buffalo, we have such a close relationship with them that anything we do for them will help us, and anything we do for the land will help our people in general, because that's our connection, the connection to the land. We come from the land, and so anything that we do as stewards of that land and to protect any aspects of the land will help generate good things for our people. So that, I just wanted to add that. And yeah, and thank you, Chad. That was really awesome slides. I really love that part of the presentation, and I'll just let anybody go who has any other questions. And I'm still on, so, okay. Thank you, Phil.
Okay, I see Victor has come online. Victor played a big role in this as far as the traditional knowledge. Victor, did you wanted to jump in here and say a few words?
Okay, do you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I just got online there. I had to go through a bunch of hoops here to get it done. And let's see. Okay, I think I'm on now. Now, what was the topic?
Victor, we're talking about the Sicangu Climate Adaptation Plan, and your role in helping us with traditional knowledge.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, what in this weather, climate change and all that's going on, I think our people were equipped to look at the changes by experiencing the environment around them. So you'll be able to calculate what you're coming into. We do have identified 4 seasons, and the seasons are noted by looking into the sky, seeing the stars when they align to certain areas, then it would be spring equinox, the rise of the Aries constellation. We call it Shanshashi Puje. When that comes, it's well noted because they see that almost every evening. But when that comes up at the time when the sun rises with it, they will conjoin in the sky. So 6 months, they calibrate the weather on 6 months. So preparing for them, usually 1 month, they'll have a preparation in sight now. So in order to prepare for winter, our people collect the resources, and they usually put them in caches. Like, for instance, Little Thunder was the leader of the Wajaje group, and his campgrounds were towards in Nebraska on the upper Niobrara River, and he planned a site there for winter location. So whenever the winter was coming, they had already prepared for fall. When fall plays out, then they'll all go to this area here, and then the area is a perfect location. It's surrounded by the hills. It's got a water going through it, and it's got timber. So the preparations made for to be able to go there. There'll be no buffalo there because they'll migrate out. So they'll have to get all their stuff. So all their dried meat that they will put, maybe a ton of that, in locations around there, and then they will dig them up during winter. So the plans are always 1 month before they would do that, and it'll sustain them till they almost run out. Most leaders, they're selected by their ability to maintain resources gathered. Those that do not are usually let go. So that is what we're looking at. We don't look for week preparation, look for months, and to get things done. Also, we never underestimate the weather, because just like today, I got blindsided by that storm in Christmas. According to what was projected by NOAA, was that it'll be cold weather but dry. So now that kind of upset that. So it caught me off balance. So I was unable to do the things I wanted to. In fact, my grandchildren and I did have no Christmas because we were socked in for almost 2 weeks, and we barely had enough food as we made it through. And that, like I said, it blindsided me. That I'd known that was coming, I would really got prepared. But usually preparations are usually calculated maybe a year or a month, and then when the stars align, and they will at certain times, so we always look to like December, when the middle of winter comes, that there'll be a lot of nighttime skies, and you hardly see the sun. It'll go down quick. So when I do business down here, I have to do everything before the sun goes down at 5. And it's hard after that, because especially when you got storms or windy things are blowing all over. So I usually schedule things like if I have to go to Rapid, I usually try to get the date down. It's about 200 miles away, so I have to plan to be there to start out in the morning and maybe stay overnight. So if the key thing is that our tribe prepared. If you didn't prepare, then you would suffer the consequences, and that is the bottom line. Looking at the conditions today, we're blessed with all this technology. We're looking at what's ahead of us, and also looking at some knowledge of the earth, earth science, looking down and and seeing reports that the Earth's core has stopped. It's reversing itself. So it may play into longer days, stuff like that. So always keep true to science stuff. Look at that and look at how we are related to that traditionally. We look at that and find where we are in that system. So always we look forward to preparing for each season and able to gather resources for each time those seasons happen. So when winter comes, all of fall is planning for that. So leaders will go out there and they'll be able to make sure that all their camps are well supplied and that everything is all set in motion and everybody's prepared. So we have a person, the Wakichus, they call it, that goes on, ensures that everybody's well equipped for the winter. They are really camp organizers that ensure that you have plenty of firewood, plenty of meat, things like that. They'll do. They look out for each other. So when our bands all go to the winter locations and forward winter locations, and they'll split up, and Wakichus will take charge. We'll be able to send people out there to ensure that everybody's getting along well. So when I was looking at the winter camp that the last summer, when I was looking at lived on this winter camp, is equipped with everything. It's kind of horseshoe location, and the camps, you can still see the 7 camps that are where they all settled. It's deep, cut deep into the vegetation. You can still see it. And you can see the way out where people come in. You see the river there, everything. It was pretty well organized. And again, that's what we have to do today, ensure that our communities are served by the tribe in utmost capacity. Like I said, I was socked in for almost 2 weeks. I can't get out. When I get out in my home there, we got the highway about maybe 6 blocks away. And when the graders come, they don't bother clearing the location to the house. We have to shovel our way out. So, and then it's also a crying shame because once we got out, we went to the stores were depleted of their supplies. So we were in sad shape. Good thing we able to, the commodities that some of our kin got, that we shared, canned food and stuff, were able to survive until the roads were opened up. And then the stores had enough supplies in it. And usually when we get hit by emergency like this, the stores are hit hard. Sometimes they don't have no change to give. The largest store that we have is also it's usually has a hard time getting supplies because the workers can't come. So I noticed that the emergency system kicked in where the National Guard came in. They started clearing the roads. But it was kind of a little too late for that to happen because they usually wait to the last minute. And it don't help because around the country we're suffering in energy because of the war that's going on. It's sapping our energy resources, and gas highs are high. And the tribe implemented a good plan. We're able to, LEAP was able to go and fill each of the propane tanks every 3 weeks. They'll come and load. We're at a hard time trying to get that. So the communities need to all join together and do what they have to in order that they'll be able to cover all these things. Otherwise, there's a number of people that died during these storms that came, and it's unnecessary. And we really lacked the preparation. We lacked the ability to look out for one another. And that is what I see that's going on. So this winter we're hit by just about everything. That COVID still kind of was activated. And then we had the energy crisis. We had high costs. And then we had lack of energy coming down. And at one time, I had to sit there almost the whole day without electricity. And I have one of these wind turbines, and that got knocked out, and I'm still waiting for it to be repaired. But it, to me, as we look down the road there, we have to really organize well, and we're not ready yet. We have to put all these components together, the weather itself, and then we have to rely on traditional knowledge as well as high tech in order for us to survive these things. And fortunately, I was able to help my family go through the system until we're able to get to the supplies and all that. So it again, here on reservation, we have traditional knowledge that's there that'll always help, and then we have tech, high tech that's really we're all getting into, like internet and stuff. We have that. We have all those resources that we've never really put them together. We have to probably institutionalize them. So there'll be people in charge of those and able to act quickly when things come down. So again, in a way, traditional knowledge helped me survive out there the best way we can. Although that when the COVID came, I lost 3 members of the family, and in that setup, and it had a lot to do with health coming out there to our household and other things that were taking place. But again, we're a lot of suffering around on the system. And again, we have to be able to get this climate adaptation going strong, and get all of our tribal, especially our government officials, all tapped in. We kind of have a lack of communication that's going on. 20 communities spread out on 100 miles either way, up north and south, about a couple of 100 miles. And but we have the technology, internet and other things to be able to communicate. So when people need help, and then they'll be able to go out and do a lot of that. So again, the reservations in a way are blessed with the traditional knowledge, and also with the non-Indian system coming in. But just a matter of trying to coordinate them as best we can in order for us to come up with a plan how would it go through those seasons, and then be able to survive those the best we can. So again, we're looking around at how people do things, plan. The tribe all needs to go out and plan, coordinate these things, and ensure that each of the councils also plan what will they do if an emergency hits. How do we handle those, or the best thing that we can do. And again, this winter got me to think about the long term, how my family's able to handle these things that are coming on. It's hard because I think I relied too much on science information, looking at what was projected, not knowing that we'd be hit by maybe 2 storms that we didn't really look at. And but I'm always keeping an eye on weather, looking at the winter, that vortex that's coming out up north, how it comes down in projection or jet stream, all that. And in a way that's helped me. But again, we haven't really perfected a lot of that. We really haven't coordinated communications on a lot of those things, and able to help each other. And that's the key, to help each other the best way we can. And that's the key to survival, is we help each other. And group efforts are a lot better than individual efforts. So we're looking at in a way, I'm looking at the long term and how to change our tribal government to get out of it being centralized, to spread out the responsibility to each community. Each community should be a mini tribe with overall support by the tribe itself. So looking at, reorganizing our tribe according to seasons is one of the things I had in mind, looking at how we're going to do that. Use traditional knowledge, which is still there. And also with the science, combine and look at both and be able to make sense of those the best we can. And so that's what I'm looking at now, to really go back and look at our traditional system setup and looking at the idea of survival, planning, and be able to meet those deadlines based on nature, what that has to offer, and look at the warning signs that come when it rains too much. It's going to produce some impacts of the weather and what we're going through. So that's really what I'm looking at. Going back to the traditional setup and how I can get my family to be able to go to that and able to get most of our family together. Most of my family are scattered in various other communities and losing a kind of connection with them because of new children coming into the system. So, but in a traditional way, all grandparents are responsible for the care of their children, no matter how old they are. No matter how far away they are in that system. So, but I would like in this tribal government, I would like to see a change in it. And the key foundation is to reform the families. I'm always saying that, repeating that, to be able to restore some of the traditional knowledge to the family systems. I know one thing now, after 50 years of research and study, I found that our traditional ways are with us, and we cannot go be able to use the knot in the system completely. We have to be able to pick out what's best for us in each. In other words, our traditional knowledge has to be blended with the non-Indian knowledge, and vice versa. Otherwise, I realize our tribal government is based on the IRA system, and it cannot survive the way it is because the way it's centralized. And I look around the world as proof, looking at how the war is going on between democracy and autocracy. And I found, looking at autocracy is based on oligarchy system, where the oligarchs, they're corrupt in that they don't, they pick out what they want in the programs they're running. In some way, I see no difference in the way we live today. Even in democracy, there's a lot of corruption going on in that system. And who pays for it? The poor people. Looking at what our system of government is trying to do, the dominant one is trying to eliminate tax for the rich. Things like that. And also they're attacking Social Security. So again, reforms down here have to begin with us looking at those, getting our people involved in governments, an election process here, and also on national scale. It's coming to a time when tribes are beginning to populate large. Arizona, for instance, the dominant people are Navajos, so they get to elect their senators. South Dakota has a large population. It could impact the election process here if we all unite together. But again, so I'm looking at the long terms, how we best can get involved in reforming. And I know that we can do it if we put our minds to it. But right now we're struggling with ourselves, in-house struggles. We have to reform our families to a system where they'll have some elements of traditionalism in it, and some elements of the non-Indian system in it. Because I know we can never take traditional knowledge like it was way back when. That has to be adjusted to fit the changing needs of today. And education is the key to that. But education, there's not a lot of priority put on that, because down here, our people are just trying to fulfill our basics, just trying to survive. And they allow the overhead government to be controlled by the ones that can do it, the ones that are able to be able to get involved in that. So again, I'm looking at a plan that the tribe should adapt to be able to organize at the smallest level. And then as they go in higher levels, to be able to conjoin with those and be able to form cooperative ventures in that system where we're all able to get the benefits in that system. So when I look at ways we can survive, those are what I look at. But again, looking at trying to reorganize even my own family system, I'm trying to reorganize that the best way I can. And again, I'm trying to teach them the relevance of helping each other. But as you expand and resources get smaller, then it's hard. So we have to impact the higher levels in some way. So I'm looking at essentially those systems, the social systems, to try to impact that. Economic systems, try to be able to organize that to meet our needs here. That's why I say that the IRA government does not meet our needs the best way it can. It's the traditional ways that really keep our people alive and well. So we're able to try to integrate that. One thing that, on the last note, that I'm looking at the traditional leaders, Sinteklesh Sparatel is a good example of a leader. And there's another one, Tecumseh is another one. Tecumseh is another leader that tried to unite all the tribes together to force the government to recognize that union, and then to maintain the position that no one's to sell their land unless all agree. And then what Tecumseh tried to do is try to use the non-Indian model, democracy. He tried to use centralized government. But and he was killed because of that. It divided the tribes and those who wanted centralization and those that didn't. And eventually, the ones that didn't want the centralized government, they joined against him, and he was killed on that. Spartil did the same thing. He tried to look at the future, what was coming. He tried to make adjustments. It is said that he had a nightmare in which he saw the last Sicangu die, and there's none left. So when he awoke, and then he tried to speed up the system, he's tried to centralize that. In the end, that's what got him killed. But again, the violence part of that system has ended in many ways. So I think we can do that. We can stand fast and try to organize the best way. And I've been also talking about how we change the system. Remember, I was telling you that when I first got out of the Army and left Regis College, then would come down here and teach on the reservations. I was able to look at the systems, because most of the lifetime I spent educating, went to Regis College, got drafted. So I spent almost 10 years outside the reservation. When I came back, it changed quite a bit. But one thing I found that you have to, in order to survive there, you had to be able to get kin help. I found as a group that we can survive. I also found in the long run, as I look back, we changed the system. The stores here, they changed to fit our needs. When I first started my family at 3 or 4, I found that when you go shopping, you have to follow the guidelines of middle class income, which is standard 3. Oh, we had 4 to 7 in the family. So you had to buy excess. In order to buy a can of beans, I had to buy 2 or 3 because it was only designed for a family of 3. So in time, we changed that. Right now, when I go to the grocery store, I see these 1-gallon cans. Those are meant for when in summer for the ceremonies and sundances. I looked at the meat system. Now we're better able to get meat because they can be customized. So I was able to get maybe 3. My family consumed about 3 or 4 pounds of meat or a hamburger every setting. So now that they're selling packaging that way, before then there used to be a family of 3. It costs more to buy individually. If you do it as a group, then it's a lot better. But we changed that. So the grocery stores are now selling more than serving for 3. And also our transportations, I used to run around in a car that could only seat 4 or 5. I got a van that seats 7. So I could take all my family shopping to long range. Before then, it's hard to do that. But again, we changed that. And those around us, looking at all the cars, most of them are vans, SUVs. And it's hard to get the 4-seaters anymore as you look at what we have here. So again, we can impact those changes if we're able to be educated on them, how to do that. So again, adapting is the key thing that our people did. One of the things that our people did was our system had to change completely every 72 years. That's the age of our grandfather, the oldest age of the grandfather. It also is in line with the wobble of the earth. Same. When I look back at the wind count in every 72 increments, I find that our tribe had to battle climate change and had to migrate to get out of harm's way to another location. So again, all these things are not knowledgeable to our people, and are certainly not knowledgeable to non-Indians. So again, the key is education and able to look at how you can change those. To get in a position to make those changes are going to be something that we have to look at, to project. And that's why I'm glad that we have this climate change that's going on here. And again, we must force our officials to sit in on these things. Our councilmen need all to be get involved in it so they can go back to the communities and prepare them. And again, that is the thing that we have to look at to reform, to be able to change our government, to meet our needs here locally, rather than looking around and trying to change what's around us. Look at change here locally first. That should be one of our focuses. But again, it's hard because of economic pressure that we're under. We're probably one of the poorest of nations. Most of the Indian reservations are, and it's hard for us to be able to make ends meet. But we always rely on traditional means of surviving, and that's what has really helped our people to survive as a nation. Otherwise, we would be acculturated completely, and losing our identity, which we pride ourselves in. So with that, I just would like to take any questions if you have any, and if not, then thank you.
Thank you, Victor. We're going to move over to Laura Edwards to give us a talk about the climate and weather stuff that's going on here. Go ahead, Laura.
All right, thank you, Phil. And thank you, Victor, for those words of retelling us how important this issue is, and how important it is for the people and the land, and your survivalhood on the land. For this presentation today, I'm sharing more of numbers and data and measurements, observations, but that's not to say I don't care about the people or the land or the buffalo. All of those are very important, and I know that was captured in the remarks that Chad and Robin shared initially with that report summary and the recommendations. Pertaining to buffalo and bison in particular, I don't have a slide on this, but one of my colleagues, well, several of my colleagues in Rapid City at the SDSU Extension Research Center there, and at the Cottonwood Research Station, they got a large grant awarded by USDA last summer, and I may have shared this with some of you, but the topic of it is climate smart commodities, and they're focusing on buffalo and bison in this region, in the Northern Plains region, and they have partnered with some entities in the region, focusing on with tribal partnerships such as Tonka Fund and some others. And so this grant, though, this project with USDA is very large, $80 million, unbelievably large. It was the only university that was a lead. All the other very large projects that were funded by USDA in that round were led by private entities, private companies. And so, the focus there will be improving systems for buffalo and bison production, keeping climate at the forefront. And so some of it is related to technology like precision livestock management, improving feed and water usage, but also managing land, and I think also meat quality and things like that, while keeping in mind traditional knowledge on tribal lands and trying to bring back buffalo to the landscape. So if you have questions about that, I'm not the person. Dr. Christy Kamek in Rapid City is a person if you're interested in that project and kind of what they're doing. Again, they just got started last summer when they got awarded in August, so that's a very new project. So here, I'm mostly going to talk more about historical trends, but certainly what we've seen very recently in the last few months kind of punctuates with an exclamation point the urgency of climate change on the land in the territory of Rosebud Sioux tribe. First of all, the land acknowledgement, and this is written and was assembled and written by my colleagues on campus at SDSU and the Wokini Initiative group. So certainly acknowledging the land and those of you who are here before us, and our equal opportunity statement as well, to serve all people equally and fairly. Just to talk a little bit about climate in general, I have two slides here, one on precipitation and one on temperature. Just to show a little bit of kind of the nation, lower 48 states at least, sorry, and where we are here in South Dakota. So looking at precipitation here, you see that wetter areas are in the greens and blues, drier areas are in the oranges and reds colors. And the Black Hills stand out as a locally very wet spot, certainly the higher elevation in the mountains there, but in generally drier to the northwest part of South Dakota and wetter to the southeast. And that's kind of, you see that all through the middle states, of the country here. Temperature, however, goes more in the north to south range, and these are temperature ranges that we're seeing kind of move northward, given the changing climate. And so generally colder to the north, warmer to the south, again, with the exception of the Black Hills, having that mountain range essentially in the middle of the plains, kind of makes its own climate. And so you see colder temperatures, wetter conditions there. But in general, it doesn't look too interesting, but there's a lot of, let's say, devil in the details, right? And bringing it down locally is really more of what matters to the people. So here, I'm going to show how NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, has broken down our state into climate divisions. And I'm going to focus on climate division number 8 here, because that includes most of the current land that's in the Rosebud Sioux Reservation area. And I know not all of your historic land area, but that climate division number 8 generally encapsulates most of the current land that you're at. And so using that, I want to illustrate climate is not static. It's not the same. And I know a lot of us have already acknowledged this, but here's some numbers, some data to tell the story. And this is looking at maximum temperature. I'll show minimum temperature next, because we'll see different patterns between maximum or the daytime high temperatures versus the nighttime or low minimum temperatures in this area. And so this is actually looking at South Dakota in general, but oh no, this is Division 8, sorry. The long-term average here for the 20th century is that black line straight across there. So that's kind of for reference what the average, the 20th century average was. The blue line, however, is the trend. And when we look at a decadal sense, 0.1 degree per decade or 1 degree per century, if you want to look at it that way, as far as daytime maximum temperatures go. You see this year on the right sticks up like a sore thumb. That's the year 2012, a year of extreme drought in the area. And this data starts at 1895 and goes through 2020. So I updated this here just recently for you all. But we saw a big cool year, in 2019. That was also a very wet year. So a lot of times we see cool and wet kind of go hand in hand in these in those times where we see extended wet periods anyway, like 2019, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more. So look at this maximum temperature trend, about 1 degree per century or 0.1 degree per decade. What's more striking, I think, is looking at minimum temperature trends, where we're seeing a more rapid increase, very much more rapid increase in overnight minimum temperatures. The coolest temperatures of the day are warming at 3 times the rate, 0.3 degrees per decade or 3 degrees per century, 3 times the rate of our daytime high temperatures. That's really interesting, and that's, I think, partly what could be causing a little bit more concern, and that has to do with livelihoods and health of both humans, our 2-leggeds, and our 4-legged, and that increasing heat overnight increases the risk of health issues for humans, especially those that have already pre-existing health issues, don't have access to air conditioning at all for cooling overnight. On the animal side, on the 4-leggeds, they are not able to cool as efficiently at night, and they stand a risk of higher heat stress during the day as well. Part of this too is due to increased humidity, increased moisture in the area, and that's partly tied to what we see as more precipitation, increased rainfall and snowfall in the region, and we have more humidity, which seems kind of odd to say given we've just had 2 years of drought essentially in a row. But in the long run, in a trend, and I'll show you this, we're actually seeing more precipitation. So I think seeing these increases in maximum, but especially minimum temperatures are pretty important to human and animal health. And I think on the plant and nature side of things, I don't know that I know what all that means as far as warmer overnight temperatures. On the annual basis, so in general, we're seeing increasing temperature, and that's true all across almost all the country, there, except for parts of the southeast states, which you see in the map at the top. That's annual temperature. So here in South Dakota and where you are right now in the south central part of South Dakota, we see a warming trend not unlike, you know, most of the rest of our area here. But looking at the lower two maps for winter and summer, if you break it down into the seasons, we see more of that warmth coming from winter than we do summer. Our winters are warming faster than our summer seasons are. And with that comes a few other things, you know, the higher potential for insects, pests, and disease to overwinter. But also comes with it, generally speaking, potentially a reduction in our need to heat as much or lower energy use for heating in the winter. But then again, we get winters like this where we do see cold, so we do still see variability or ups and downs from year to year. So it's not consistent all the time. Summertime too, we see general warming trend, but remember we're seeing our minimum temperatures really increasing faster than our daytime highs. Along with that, we also see a lengthening of our growing season, and that's the days, the number of days between the last spring frost and the first fall frost. And I believe for this, they use 32 degrees, just freezing. And so observed on the past in the green, we've already seen we've already seen a lengthening of our frost-free or growing season by about 11 days across much of the region. Moving ahead in the future, we're going to continue to see temperatures warming. You know, there's nothing really indicating otherwise, and so along with that comes the extension or lengthening of the frost-free season as well. So by still another maybe 10 days or so by the time we get to, you know, a couple decades from now. So we're going to continue to see those kinds of changes occur with the warmer temperatures and lengthening of the frost-free season. But I will say that spring and fall frosts, you know, you get those fluke years where you get really late or really early one way or the other. And so we're not seeing real consistent trends, some, but not really consistent trends in the growing season length. I did do a little comparison looking at just one individual weather station at Mission that's been in place there since about 1950, 1951. So I looked at a period of about 30 years from 61 to 1990, and then compare that to 1990 to 2020. For that particular location, the spring average frost dates have not changed too much, but we have seen the frost dates in the fall occur a little bit later by about 3 to 4 days. So remember the national or the regional map showed our frost-free season, you know, extending maybe 10, 11 days. I do think that's true in some parts of the region, particularly further north you go. But down here, we're seeing it maybe not as extreme, but still we are seeing longer frost-free seasons in general. That also, though, is good news. So that can extend our growing season. You know, thinking on the food sovereignty topic that Robin and Chad talked about earlier, certainly we can put up hoop barns or greenhouses, those kinds of things to get an early start to some of our food production and or extend later into the fall, you know, so that those crops are protected from frost both in the spring and the fall. I think that's a good strategy, and other things like that are great ideas. But nature is helping out along the way here too, or rather I should say climate change is helping out along the way too by extending our growing season. So some key messages just on temperature. So we're not, just a reminder, we're not warming the same in all seasons. We are seeing general warming trend. Potential for some overwintering, you know, or increasing winter survival of some pests, diseases, because we're not getting as cold in the winter season as we have. We still get cold. We're still, you know, at a northern latitude, and we still get below freezing for sure. But some pests and insects are able to, you know, burrow into the soil or take cover in other ways that are more able to survive if we don't see, say, -40 degrees as often or -20 degrees as often as we used to on the extreme cold side. Longer growing seasons, but a lot of variability still. So if you're, again, growing your own food, planning for that and the gardening side of things, certainly be prepared for that increasing heat stress at night, especially in the summer. And again, I myself, I don't have a lot of information on impacts on some of the traditional or native plants that are maybe more important to you for ceremonial reasons or other social or cultural traditions, but I'm sure this stuff is happening in that way too. So looking at precipitation, and this is data again from about 5 years ago. I should say that this map and the temperature map that I showed earlier are being updated as we speak for the next national climate assessment that will be published later this year. So I know that some of the data will be updated, but from some early things I've seen just from what I see here in South Dakota and the Northern Plains. Up here, we're still seeing a wetter trend, this trend towards increasing precipitation. As of 5 years ago, when this data was published, you know, here in South Dakota, in your part of the state, the south central part of the state, you're among the wettest increasing trend, 10 to 15% or more increase from early 20th century to around the year 2000, more or less. Compare that. But just like temperature, we don't see the increase in precipitation occurring in all seasons in the same way. You know, winter is more of a kind of a mixed bag, with some areas getting wetter and drier in our region. We see more consistently wetter patterns in spring and fall, and a little bit in the summer season as well. I'll dig into some details here on that Climate Division 8 that I shared earlier. But just to say that we are getting wetter faster than most parts of the country. That map will change a little bit with the new update coming out later this year, but still, I don't think that increasing trend is going to change, especially with the new data that's going to be included, including 2019, which is the wettest year on record for South Dakota, hands down. There's no doubt that we'll see wetter trend there. So looking at, again, Climate Division 8, that area that I showed you previously, this is annual total precipitation. So that includes rainfall and the liquid snow water equivalent. So if you melt the snow, how much water was in there? So annual totals from 1895 to 2020. And some of the, and so you see the 20th century average, the black line, that's 19.48 inches per year. See a lot of ups and downs. 1915 was the previous wettest year on record until just very recently, 2019, as I said earlier, almost everywhere in the state except maybe the Black Hills and maybe some parts of the Southwest, but 2019 is now the year that stands out in our climate history as far as how much we have in our modern observed history. Certainly there, I'm sure we have some history of other wet years too, but that was the year, you know, where we saw a lot of flooding in the spring, continued storms in the summer, and another round of flooding in the summer season as well, I believe it was July June or July of that year. So, but since then, the last 3 years have been relatively dry, drier than the 20th century average. And so, you know, we can't rely on consistently wet or consistently dry. And I think that's something that we'll continue to see in the future, this, you know, very rapid swings from wet extremes to dry extremes. Another pair of years very similar to that is 2011 and 2012. That's down here. 2011 was above average. Certainly as far as your water supply goes, Missouri River, it was plentiful, full of water, but locally, precipitation took a big dive in the year right after in 2012. So, you know, I think this is something that we should be planning for and keeping in mind on how we can plan our systems and develop systems that are resilient to these rapid swings and extremes. And now we're seeing multi-year drought in the region. Taking a look at the flip side, not just the wet extremes, but the dry extremes, I just looked at one measurement of drought. This is the Palmer Drought Severity Index that a lot of scientists use. But one way to look at how often are we seeing drought or how severe a drought, and I just took the month of June, which is kind of middle of the year, at the end of the wet season in the spring. And you can see in the recent last few decades, say since 1985 or 1990, we've had a number of wetter years where we've had sufficient moisture, let's say, maybe some years too much, but sufficient moisture and not so much drought throughout that time, with the exception of the early 2000s. And then currently we have a couple of years back to back now where we're seeing some drought. So, you know, we're not seeing drought as much, but that doesn't mean we're not seeing impacts. As I think some of our natural and human systems are maybe becoming accustomed to a wetter climate, a wetter and warmer climate. And so when you see those drought periods, they maybe have maybe more significant, more substantial impact than maybe if we saw the same kind of precipitation deficit or shortage, you know, some decades ago. So it's kind of a perspective thing. Then breaking it down by season, I know if you're on a small screen, this is maybe a little bit harder to look at, but similar to temperature, you know, we're not seeing precipitation increases the same in all seasons. Winter time is generally level, at least historically. When we look at projections, which I don't have a map or graphic here, but when we look at climate projections for the rest of the century, we see more increases in wintertime precipitation in those projections, those long range projections. So this kind of level trend that we've seen in winter, I don't think is what we can expect in the future. Historically, though, you see spring and fall, which are the two graphs on the right, and that blue line again is the trend. That's where we see our largest increases in precipitation on the trend. Not always, but oftentimes historically. And I think that fall season increase is part of what might shift into that winter increase. Certainly this winter, we're off to a real big start. I was looking at the climate data again for that station south of Mission, just as a station to compare to. And it's very hard to find a similar winter so far. When you look at December and January, the extreme snowfall you've seen already, you have to go back really far, if not ever, to see a December, January as snowy as what you've had. Already we've seen more snow. I think about 43.5 inches is the total so far for the season. Average year is about 38. So you're already above average for snowfall for the year. And you're near the total snowfall that you saw in 2020 to 21 and 2019 to 2020, those 2 years. You have about as much snow now as you had those 2 total years. And just to kind of accentuate that point, we are seeing increases in heavy precipitation events, and that's snowfall and heavy rainfall events. Anything that brings moisture. So you don't need to look at the details here on the maps, but this is just to remind me to tell you that what we see here with increased large events with kind of dry periods in between increases our chances of flooding on the flash flooding side, but also increases our chances of short-term drought developing very quickly, or a rapid onset drought, or a flash drought. So increases in precipitation doesn't mean increases in all the small events. It is coming more and more in these larger events. And so that's something else to consider, how can we respond or adapt to that change. That could mean infrastructure and drainage issues. It could mean changing farming practices to reduce runoff in these heavy rain events, and a lot of other things to consider here in this kind of change towards movement towards heavy precipitation events with drier times in between. I think I've talked about most of all of these here. Rapid extreme changes from wet to dry and back and forth, and seasons aren't all the same. I know as far as agriculture, there are strategies already developed, and they're kind of fall under the umbrella of soil health, range management kinds of things. And I know within, South Dakota State Extension and some other folks, Grassland Coalition, Soil Health Coalition, they're developing a forage association here in South Dakota. On the agriculture side, there's a lot of tools and resources available to help create more climate resilience or climate smart systems for agriculture, farming, and forestry. So certainly, I would guess they're probably a little short on the traditional knowledge side of things, but I think there's ways that you can adapt some of the experience if you ever want to tie into those groups. I think I'll skip over some of these flooding pictures in the interest of time, but certainly we've seen, several floods of record on the White River and around the region. And not to forget, I know you all as a tribe have other ways of documenting weather and climate extremes, including the winter count, which is another resource, maybe not as numerical as what I've shared with you, but still helps tell the story of significant weather and climate events in the history of your people. Not to forget that. Just want to touch on something in the very current, and I believe Phil and others know about this. I know Syed certainly has supported this. With Rosebud Weather, we have our South Dakota Mesonet, which is our weather station network, has a weather station there. And I believe there'll be more coming around the region, if not on tribal land. So keep in mind that might be coming more, but there's one station there for sure. This is the current weather that I saw this morning, about an hour and a half ago or so. And it shares current temperature, and this is updated every 5 minutes. Oh, I should put the, I'll put the link in here. Oops. For the Mesonet, so you can go to the website if you want. But one thing that they were able to develop with support of the Bokini Initiative on campus at SDSU is translating this into Lakota. And this is what that same weather dashboard, current weather, looks like translated into Lakota. And I don't have this live, this is just a screenshot of this, but all the words that are underlined with dotted can be clicked on, and then there's audio that plays. And so they had someone actually verbally say all these words in Lakota in the hopes that the language doesn't get lost, because weather and climate are so important to what you're doing, and certainly to the climate crisis working group here. And I know we know that's important to you all. I know some of the words don't translate exactly, but there are translations there for you. I should say too, with this new weather station that was just upgraded this last year, this is the brand new station, and supposedly this is what it looks like there today. This is the picture on the webcam from this morning. Quite a lot of beefed up equipment compared to what they had previously, and including the rain gauge on the right that you see that has all these little fans around it. Kind of fins. That is an all-weather precipitation gauge, so it measures rain in the summer, but it also measures the liquid equivalent of snow in the winter. It has a little heated rim on there, and then the rain or the precipitation falls in, and it measures how much liquid, even in the winter season. So we have a snow depth sensor. That's this funny device up here. Wind, temperature, all those other things. And so if you have any questions about the data that's being measured, but it is available. Rosebud Water Resources through Syed's group has supported this weather station. So this data should be accessible to the tribe, just like any other host of a weather station would have access to, or a sponsor. So let us know if you have questions about that. I have my contact information up here, but I know Phil and Paula and others know how to find me. So if you have questions or any discussion, I'm happy to entertain that at this time. Or Phil, I'll let you lead the talk.
Thank you very much, Laura. It was good information. Something interesting to think about is all the snow that we've been getting. What's it going to mean for the aquifer, water tables and stuff like that? I know Robin said that Rocky Mountains was getting a lot of snow. So that's good for the relatives to the south that get water from the Colorado River. So is there any questions out there?
I see Paula has her hand up, so.
Yeah. Oh, Paula.
Hi, Laura. Thank you for the information. And I just wanted to let everybody know that, Laura not only handles the weather and all the data and a bunch of other things, but at the same time, I'm working with her on getting rain gauges for all of the communities, all of the community centers. So that way we'll have more accurate readings throughout the reservation on our precipitation data. So we're going to, we started working on that during the storm. And so I just wanted to give her kudos and let everybody know on the call that she is, it's the Volunteer Rain Gauge Network. It's called Cocorons. And so I contacted all the community chairmen, and they've agreed to host some of the rain gauges at the community centers. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. And that's kind of an update of how we're trying to develop more accurate data on the reservation. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Paula, for mentioning that. I kind of forgot about that. It seems like November was like a year ago, when we talked about that. But certainly, yeah, Cocoraz is a great volunteer network, and it gets your community involved. In addition to having those precipitation records, it gets people involved in measuring it, seeing it themselves. We can help with some training. Myself and Melissa Smith at the National Weather Service in Rapid City are the coordinators for your region. So if that's what you need to go, we can do that. And we have rain gauges available. So when people sign up, we can certainly provide rain gauges, just the simple kind of clear cylinder rain gauges.
I want to take a moment to recognize one of our relatives to the north, Manny and Renee Ironhawk, and also Dr. Joseph Robertson from the Sicangu. So we also have some Ochete Shakoni members listening in. Where did Ion had her hands up? Ion Takun Woyu Genuhahu.
Yes, I do. Pilama aksto. Alila opila taka ichichak that hokelakchi. I want to express my gratitude to you all for all the work that you've been putting together here. I was aware of the process as it was going, and I'm pretty pleased with the way things have come together. My concern is the native plants. Has anybody done a survey to that regard? And if there hasn't been, how do we gauge the growth? For a couple of years now, I felt that I couldn't get any of the sage. And I don't know if it had anything to do with the winter before, the drought before, the growing season, or what it was, but they seem to be so much shorter. And so what I had to do was I had to get some relatives up in the Black Hills to harvest me some, and that was pretty much what I had. So I wasn't able to get out and harvest my own because I don't know what it was actually, but I'm just kind of curious as to whether or not our seasons for the past years have had anything to do with the growth.
This is Robin. Let me try to respond to that, Hanoion. And the answer is no. No one has really done a coherent or organized look at that. And that's the kind of thing that we're recommending. For special plants like that, you and folks are probably the best people to know where they are and how they're doing. And organizing those observations in different places, maybe working with some folks, Laura and James and others can probably put you in touch with some people, but those are the kind of changes that we're talking about, is that plants may be a lot smaller, or maybe they go away. And you may be starting to see the beginning edge of those changes. And those observations are really important. And the unfortunate answer is no, and I think we're gonna miss a lot because we haven't set up to look for things.
Yeah, I agree with what Robin said. Most of what I've seen or heard is maybe more anecdotal. We don't have discrete measurements of it. But we know that there are changes year to year or period, to period, but we don't have anything kind of hard data. That's a way to put it. Yeah.
Well, thank you for all that you do. One of the things I wanted to share with everybody here was that the Historic Preservation Office does have a database of local plants here, and maybe it would be a start to bring out a few of them and then look at the trend and see, actually put out a survey maybe and see who uses that plant and what they feel about the harvesting and the abundance or non-abundance of it. Yeah, there has to be some kind of answers because, yeah, like I said, I have not been harvesting my own sage. I've been getting it from relatives somewhere else. So I just kind of wondered about that. But if anybody wants to take that up as a project or what have you, we sure have the information here and we're willing to help. We just don't have the manpower or the time to do something like this, but it would be interesting to see it. Thank you, Pilamaya.
Oh,
And I'll just add one more thing that we ran across in our work, at least 2 studies that had been done by Native people, at least one Rosebud resident who had science training and identified valuable native plants for the Lakota. So there's good resources on what the plants are, but the kind of change observations are not there.
we do have some tribal leaders on here. Donna, are you there? Do you have any comments or questions? Council reps. Any other questions or comments?
Phil, I kind of remark on some of the data that was just shown. And to me, I'm looking for things like that, more precise things, because it kind of gives me a heads up on what I'm to expect. So when I see down there that the season for growing and all that is extended, then there's for farmers, that's good. But for our needs and purposes, it's not good, because we don't do a lot of agriculture here. But if the season's kind of extended, the wet season, things, an extension of growing, then I see a problem within our area. For instance, I usually keep my my area, which is about 1 or 2 acres. I usually keep that trimmed. But lately, I haven't really done a lot of that. I usually do it just to keep the insect, like flies, keep them at bay. But if this extends a little longer, the growing season of weeds will be there. And then usually abruptly, the wetting season ends, then we have a mini drought there, which means by July, we have, a full-blown vegetation growing, and then it starts to dry. Then we have a problem there because of fires. Sometimes static electricity comes from the sky and it ignites fires. That's happened around where I live twice, even this spring. And I was blocked from going to my home till they contained it. So another time I had almost overnight stay because of the smoke that came from the canyons which I live by. So sometimes I get worried when the wet season brings a lot of vegetation growth, then it abruptly ends towards fall or early late spring. So then I get worried about that, about things like that, and it kind of would be something that the tribe should know, and they'll be able to do a lot of mowing during that time. As I see houses around when I go by to town, and all filled with shrubs, and that's all danger with regard to fire. So things like that I'm looking for. And even traditionally, if the growing season extends, it's going to impact the seasonal migrations or the seasonal plants in that. And that's one measuring device when our tribe should leave. If there's a anomaly in the pattern of growth, then they sense something's wrong. So that's one of the signs that will cause our people to move to areas away from the source that they live on. So usually springtime is also gathering of resources. So if that's extended, then it overlaps into another area in that. So and I'm not too sure, but I've also heard that if if the growing season extends, then the medicinal plants will grow to an extent that it causes our people to make a choice of moving or not. So those things I see there are precisely what I want and what should be in every home to look at, the science. My father would be happy because when he lived in Nebraska, he lived on agriculture. He did farm work there, and usually my father usually helped run a farm with his boss, a Japanese. He worked there for 30, 40 years, and they relied on traditional ways of growing. They knew when to grow, when not to. So they were the first to begin to harvest their crops before the first frost set in. Usually, with beets, when you grow beets, they usually be ready to harvest when the ground freezes. Then they have to get them out right away. They let them in a day or two, then they'll spoil. And also, beets will gather full sugar in the system. So, what my father and that Japanese knew when. And some of the farmers in that valley, there's 75,000 in that valley that the Scotts Bluff were farming, that they will be hit by that. And they'll strain to get their crops in before they start losing that sugar content, and then the beets start rotting. So they knew, they also knew when to plant too, sometimes earlier. I always wondered why my grandmother kept those gallon cans that when she bought things, she'd keep them, and she had a whole stash of them. She would put them over her corn during that season when the haying comes. So my father and the Japanese used to, so the farmers in that valley used to look to them whenever they should harvest or plant. And that they did it by using the traditional knowledge in that. So a lot of, but now it's replaced by scientific things. And they'll be a lot happier if the growing season extends during that time. So things like that I look to, I try to implement as much as I can. And just me being alone is not enough. It has to be everybody involved. That valley of Scotts Bluff, farmers would look to each other, and then they never copyright their stuff because they share. So they'll irrigate. They used to irrigate by when they grow their crops, and then they would plow to the area where they survey, where they can irrigate. And they'll waste some of the crops that they grew, but that they didn't mind because they have a surplus of say beets. So they do that. But and what happens? One farmer went out there and was able to get a large. It was a rubber plant. Rubber, it extended. They could put it together and extend about a mile. Then he ran water through that, and he punctured holes in where the beets grow, so the farmers didn't have to plow. So next season, all the farmers did that. So they saved a lot of things in that sense. It's also likely for tribes to also the same. That whenever a tribe moves into the culture area, they'll do as the other tribes do, so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. So things like that, I'm really interested in getting as much data stored in again, this wonderful technology of computers and flash drives I could use to project things and be able to help educate people. But if you educate just a few, that's not good enough. It has to be the whole in that sense. So again, like I said, to me, just trying to have a safe livelihood, I look at things like that, and always I don't really catch at a good time. I'm not, in other words, I'm unlucky with regard to trying to project things and do things that'll help me as survivors and that. And we need a lot of that as time goes. So again, I'm happy that they showed this, so I'll be able to put a lot of that into the system that I have. Whoopula.
Thank you for sharing, Victor. Yeah, one thing I didn't mention that is really important when you were talking about fire, and I've heard this from others too, like Dr. Darren Clabo, who is our state's wildland fire meteorologist. He's done some climate studies as well pertaining to large wildland fire occurrences, and he's finding now, we no longer have a clear fire season. We are seeing large fires all 12 months of the year. Thinking back to 2017, we had that Legion Lake fire in the Black Hills that burned timber area, in the middle of December. And typically we have snow cover on the ground preventing fires. And, with the Cottonwood fire in 2016, was it 40,000 plus acres between the Badlands, north of the Badlands area, and Cottonwood. So yeah, we're seeing, I'd say, a very different fire season and fire behavior with, again, these changes in precipitation and temperature both playing together in the landscape.
And I'll just add that fire is often the vehicle of landscape change, meaning that what grows back after a fire is increasingly not what was there before. As climate changes, the system may sort of persist because maybe there's trees there already. But when there's a fire, the new vegetation can get a hold. So that's often the way turnover happens.
Thank you, Robin and Laura. I think we'll wrap it up here. I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. And Claude, you have a question?
Yeah. I know you're closing shop there, but I found, honey, our Lakota way of life was prayer. And we believe in prayer. And the Makoche, Ina Maka, is a living energy that feels the same energies we feel. That is the understanding and the belief system of our Lakota people. And why we have a word called we chokuja. The word we is sun, cho is good, and kuja is sickness. And why wherever our Titan to our Lakota people that we were more of the traveling kind with our teepees and the horse, and how they communicated with all living energy, and how there's a long story of how we communicated with the animals, the plants, the air, the water. Several things I just want to quickly mention is the early hunters of the buffalo with the horse, when the horse came into our Hochoka. And why we call our circle of life whole. And that's the voice. And Choka and center. And so our voice from our spiritual energy of ourselves, when we say a prayer, we send a vibration, a voice. And why the early hunters communicated with the horses, and I was told these horses didn't have reins, and how they rode up on the buffalo, and when they released the arrow, the horse would turn the same time as the buffalo would turn when it felt the pain on the side. So the horse would turn at the same time for the hunter to reload, because it takes two arms to shoot the bow. And so it'll give the hunter a time when he makes a turn, the buffalo and the horse would turn at the same time, and the hunter would reload his bow and go after another one. That communication was there was a bond between the horse and the man, and a lot of stories of how the man communicated with his horse. And the other quick thing that I want to mention is wherever our people went and moved, they would bless the ground first. They would have grass dancers come out and they would put grass on the sides of their belts to represent the sacred energy of grass. And they danced. They blessed the ground where the camp was going to set up their camp. And so this energy of prayer is really important. And I was talking to some educators recently about the inappropriate behavior of our youth, and a lot of times it comes from the home, and the home and the communities we have today. We don't get along. We have a lot of wichokuja. We have a lot of sickness towards each other, and there's a lot of I talk about the good and the bad and the ugly. There's a lot of ugly energy, people throwing mud at each other, or I hate to use the word mud, but in a way of trying to describe that our Teosh fires are not healthy anymore. We have a lot of alcohol and drug use, and these pejutas that give us good health, they know. So I noticed that too, and looking for these herbs and plants that help us live. So I just wanted everyone to be aware of that. That there's a song that our Wolakota express the connection to our Chanupa, and that Chanupa is coming, and you need to hold it and don't fool me. Don't fool me. So you got to remember those of you who pray with the Chanupa, and our way of and I always throw this out there too. That one drop of Indian blood that you have is the Hochokan, to the connection to the spirit world that we come from, or Ucheti Shakoin. So we believe in the circle. We believe in this Hochokan. So that's the important thing that I just wanted to throw out there, that there's a lot of so-called sun dances and whatever that are going on, but do they really mean it? Is their prayers really strong? And through that, there's a lot of unhealthy, inappropriate behavior with our communities, and that's affecting our school boards, our council, is affecting our schools, and nobody's getting along, and a lot of good teachers leave because of the way the community is. So we come from that spiritual world, our earth body. We come from Makha. The fourth direction when we load our pipe, or sacred Chanumpa, is to the south. Why the word that represents the animal nation, why is there a word in there that reflects or tells us that and humbles us is that that word maka, wamakashkan, wamakashkan oyate. The fourth direction, we take our chanshasha and we put it in our chanupa. So these are things that people need to be aware of when you pray. You pray with that fourth pinch, then do you mean it? Wamakashkan oyate etan ohipi. Hunupa, hunupa, na hutopa, na makia, na tona hawahukuza, na. We come from that world of sacred energy. Every one of us, Lakota people. Why the Black Hills is so important to us in our way of life, our Lakota. Woodshake ogna ohipi. Kahena kiksuyako. Ahani ana tukashla amaka. Amakaka. My grandfathers taught me these things when I was growing up and teaching me, giving me advice. Wahokuka. Makab. Remembering these teachings of the Chanupa. So these are things I just wanted to throw that in there about the power of prayer. Thank you for listening.
We'll be wrapping up. Robin, thank you. Everybody, thank you for listening. Remember, we have the climate adaptation plan that we need to implement. So if anybody needs a copy of it, we'll send you a link so that you can become part of this. We still have a lot of work to do ahead of us. Just like those studies that need to be done that Ione mentioned with the traditional plants and medicine and protecting our Lakota way, our ceremonies. All of these are interconnected. We have scientific efforts that we could use, and all these terms that Claude mentioned, such as the Mitake Oyasi, Makasi Tomani, Unchimaka, Chanupa, Tehicha Sawi. All of these are all interconnected to our traditional Lakota way of life. And those are very important. And we need to help our tribe to plan and prepare for the next storm that's coming. Remember we still have the Lakota calendar to live by also. So we have a lot of things to do, a lot of work to do. The bison, and we need to work, increase our bison herds to help with the climate. These lands that are here once was roamed by millions of bison. So they are made for this country. So traditional knowledge is very important as we move forward. With that, I want to ask Claude to say a prayer for us as we work ahead and helping our leaders to address the climate change for each other. Claude, Wachichelo.
For those of you who don't understand Lakota, ask grandfathers to help the healing of all living energy. And we, as Honupa, we're just like that plant. We have the same energies of the plant has. That Mother Earth gives medicine for us to live. And the grandfathers that give us direction through ceremony, how to prepare and get ready for what's coming. These things are coming. Tokantaka, we show each other, Kilana. Oh, Gapoecher. And, Makan, Tatia Topana, Wakata. Te we, oh, Gapoecher. Ochitaka, Onshaka, Tokantaka, One picked. Kamititaka, Dona had a woke happy, happy kana. We chose on it, oh, kicked. Oh, Gapo, oh, Metapas.
Oh, Whoopilala. Claude, I forgot to mention in March, it's the Ishtawi Chayazampi is the moon of blindness, and that's been going on for ages, where the people call that month the moon of blindness because of the blizzards and the whiteout. So we still got a ways to go before this winter ends. Usually we get like a 6-month winter. So I hope we can help our tribe prepare for all this. And Claude, you forgot to mention the spaceships, the UFOs. No, just kidding.
That's, if I start talking about that, that'll be another 2 hours.
Don't tell Robin about the spaceships and the UFOs. He might put it in a report with the federal government. They might think we're crazy. Okay, thank you, Chad. Everybody, thank you. We're gonna close here. Pilama below Mitako.
Oh,
Thank you.
Stella.
Thank you.
Aho.
Thank you.